first of all, appreciate you coming on. It's nice that you've we struggle to get in the day because, like we both said, we're quite busy, so we're doing it in the evening. So I appreciate your time massively. For the ones that have been watching and listening before, this is like bringing it to the close of the chapter for the female topic, which it makes sense to get you on because you're going to introduce yourself in a minute, and then everyone will see why, because you're heavily involved in the female game in the county. So it seemed the right thing to do after speaking to the clubs to get an understanding of what the county do. So this will hopefully then answer many questions, and I'm excited to see what comes of it. So over to you, Matt. If you could give us an introduction to what you are, who you are, etc., that'd be amazing, mate.
Yeah, no worries. Cheers, Chris. So Matt Hodgson, I'm the Women and Girls Development Officer for Devon FA. I also do the safeguarding role, but obviously we're here to talk about the female game tonight. We're going to talk about a lot of what we do, but generally it's about getting more girls involved in football at the early stage and supporting their pathway and transition through into hopefully female adult game in the future, as well as looking at coaching opportunities, volunteering opportunities, refereeing opportunities for females as well. It's not all just about playing, but as we talk through this, you'll see there's so many different programs to try and ensure every female has got an opportunity to play somewhere. I've worked there now for 11 years. Haven't always done the women and girls role, so started off as just kind of a generic FDO, and then sort of changed around the staff, led to me taking on the women and girls role now, which I've been doing for must be 8 years, I expect now. So as we go on, so much has changed in the world of women's football in that time, so it's good to be a part of it.
Brilliant. So that's perfect, because this is one of the big things I want to come on to straight away. So I've got down here, and I know we're not going to cover it all because 8 years is a long time. So I just want to get sort of some of the biggest things that you've seen. So from an FA point of view, from the county FA, but also from your personal experience, female football, when you first entered into that realm, what it looks like when you first stepped in the door 8 years ago to now, and I'll let you explain. I've seen bits in the last couple of months from the FA and what the women's game's doing. So it's gone crazy in 10 years, and you've been a part of that. So can you just explain how, for someone like you, how that looked, how it felt, and just some of the big things that have changed?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started in the role, not going to lie, it's quite scary because I hadn't had a big involvement in female football previous to taking on the role. Obviously, working with the county FA previously, I knew what was going on. But it's at the time when I took on, it's such a unique format of the game in terms of I'm used to the men's structure, having grown up and played in it. The female structure at the time, there was a lot happening, but there was no kind of joint up approach to anything. So there was lots of teams around, and there was a good number of sort of female teams, but there was no kind of structure in terms of how do we make sure that girls at a young age are able to get involved in footy. How are they then able to take the next step into what might be like a grassroots club team and play some league fixtures? After that, are they going to feed into a ladies team that is linked to that youth club? Are we going to have more females as role models for the youngsters to look at? Slowly but surely over the time, thanks mostly to the sort of the national success of female football in terms of like the Women's Super League starting up, the England ladies team not quite getting over the line for a gold medal yet, but doing so well at some of the big tournaments, and just a lot of work that some of the partners have done and the FA have done to just promote female football and get it to kind of the level that we are now. It's taken time for it to sort of come through, and when by no means there yet, of course, still so much to do with it. But we're at a stage now where those kind of pathways are more set in people's minds. So we know that from a young age, and we'll talk about some of the programs later, but girls pretty much from the age of 5 now can get involved in affiliated football. Whether that's playing fixtures or not is another matter, but they're able to start at the same age as a boy would. And the pathway all the way through is kind of similar in the sense that they know there's a future for them in youth football, then into adult football. There are still some struggles, which are the same now as they were when I first started. And geographically, Devon is probably one of the hardest counties in terms of that. You've just got such big distances for people to travel to get involved. It can be the case for boy teams, but obviously if you've got a girl that's living somewhere a bit more remote, like your Kingsbridge areas or very far in East Devon or North Devon, and there isn't a girls team that is at her age, there's that difficulty of actually there's not an offer of girls football for them, which is where probably one of the biggest changes has benefited in terms of mixed football. So when I first took on the role, mixed football was permitted just up to under 11s, primary school age. It then very quickly went from the 11s to 12s to 13s to 14s. We're at the position now where actually it's just all the way through youth football. There are, of course, less girls playing mixed football at 16, 17, 18, but we have now got that opportunity for girls to play anywhere they want, not just in the girls team. And as we'll come on to again a bit later on, we talk about sort of the girls' talent pathway. The girls that have played in mixed football that time really benefited from the development that offers. So kind of in summary, we've gone from lots of things happening but no joined-up approach, and there's not really a kind of vision for the future, to now having nationally led strategies on girls football about how we get them involved, how we retain them in football, how we give them a pathway through to play at the bottom level of ladies football if that's what they want to do, or have the opportunity to progress to the top level if they've got the ability and that's what they also want to do.
Brilliant, mate. I think there's so much there to look at that we could talk about, and I want to just pick up on the area because I've lived here all my life, and it's not just a female thing, is it? It's just in general we will always be, in my opinion, always playing catch up to big cities and big hubs where we tend to get things a little bit later, or just geographically, like you said, it's just very, very difficult. What's your take on the amount of, so we'll talk about the pathways, and I think it's really important to know, like you said, we're talking about players at the moment, but there's also many avenues which I hope you cover later as well for any females in the sport. I want to just touch on now, when you first started, the amount of girls teams and women's teams, how much has that changed? And some of the players we spoke to before at the clubs, they really spoke about not having those role models. There's like one or two around that that they knew about, and now, like you said, there's so many that you can name that most girls that are interested in football will know of them. So how has that changed for you, as in locally though, for the clubs in Devon?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're going to base it on the kind of the numbers of teams that we have in Devon, actually the number that was there when I first started in comparison to the number that we've got now isn't that different. It's not as if we've gone from there's only 20 sort of female teams to 100 odd now. There were a large number of teams previously, but actually there was lots of teams that were kind of like registered or affiliated that didn't actually play a lot of football. They registered because they had some girls that trained, and we had a kind of downward spiral in that. When I first started, so we were a bit more efficient in terms of actually let's make sure we're recording properly where there's opportunities for girls to play, rather than just letting clubs decide where they want to. So we kind of had a drop off a year or two after I started in terms of being a bit more honest about where the opportunities are. And then since then, and that links into all the big FA programs, it's just gone upwards and upwards and upwards in terms of the number of teams that are growing. Yes, general interest, and obviously once a local club starts doing something, another local club might go, well, we need to start doing that, otherwise we're going to get left behind. There's been a little bit of that, which is positive, having a little bit of healthy competition. But a big thing, like you've just said there about the role models, that might be role models nationally, so it might just be knowing that who Fran Kirby is, who Steph Houghton is, who these players are. And now, because some of the football, or a lot of the football, the ladies' football, is on mainstream TV, they're actually able to go and watch them as well, rather than just know about them, which is fantastic. But more locally as well, thinking about some of the role models that we've had. And again, we'll touch on it when we talk about the talent pathway, but Devon has a really proud history in the last sort of, certainly in my time, of having players start their football journey at 9 or 10 and actually go on to be selected for England setups. And we've got some players now that are playing in the Women's Super League, the team. So Devon often, like you said, gets thought of as, it's just, it's a rural county, it's got a very old population, it's also relaxed down there. No, like we've actually got real talent down here. The one thing that makes it difficult for us linking into those role models is we haven't got a big female club down here. We've got Plymouth Argyle, Exeter City, Buckley's. We've got some really good level of clubs, but we don't have a Bristol City, a Chelsea, a Liverpool that are playing in the Super League. That not only have they got the brand linked to the men's football, and they're huge clubs, not so much Bristol City obviously, but some of the other ones, they have got really good female setups. We're not there yet. Obviously, ambition is to look at the likes of maybe Plymouth or Exeter linked to a pro club to hopefully make that jump to keep us going in that upward spiral. But we're in a really healthy position now in terms of teams, and like I said, we've got good coverage across the county, but we're not finished. There's a lot more work that we still need to do.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's interesting because talking to the clubs you just mentioned then, and those guys, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to do Exeter, and funnily enough, today I was going to speak to Jamie at Yeovil, which is obviously now got that link with Bridgewater, so we're trying to find out a little bit about that, and he had an incident at work with his car, so we've had to reschedule that. So I'm looking forward to that. I know that's slightly out of our county, so it's just somebody that was a bit closer that I played football with, that it was another slightly higher step. I think it was important for me to try and grasp the difference in the leagues. Like you said, we can't compare what we do down here to Chelsea's, it's and your Man City's, because it's just such a different setup. So I think it's finding what we can do down here, like you said, and doing the best what we can. But I think what I want to touch on there, what you said, was the pathways. I remember that it's very difficult down here, and I hope you mentioned some of the successes in a minute, but there's some real good talent down here for boys and girls, and you hit the nail on the head that everyone thinks that we're a retirement sort of county, that we come down here, chill out. Yes, we are relaxing. Yes, we got the pleasure of bringing up our kids in a pretty safe environment compared to obviously the hustle and bustle of some cities. So you take the good with the bad. I appreciate that, but I think they really do confuse that with that we got no passion and pride and hunger down here. So it's nice to know that we are having those successes, because I think if we keep having them, then more and more people come down, like they will do with the males as well. So can you talk to us then, please, about a young girl starting out, wanting to have their first taste of football. What does a pathway look like in Devon? What does it entail? How do they go about doing it? And to get to that final point, like you said, these final points are going to be different. They might not be playing, they might be refereeing, they might be coaching. So can you give us an idea of what the county FA offer for a girls' pathway, please, mate?
Yeah, sure. So great. I've actually just been out before here to visit one of our sort of Wildcat centres that we've got. So I'll start on that. So the Weetabix Wildcat centres just changed branding to Weetabix, which is great to have such a big brand on board. That's part of what's been so great for female football recent times, that you're getting some big players on board with the sponsorship and stuff. So the Wildcats program is essentially 2 or 3 years old, but it's really starting to get into its own now, is the introduction into football for 5 to 11-year-olds. So it's kind of going back in time to maybe 10 years ago, where that school club links were so important for girls football and trying to get them out of school and do some football. The FA sort of directive has gone away from that a little bit in my time, and we're coming back to it now, thinking about actually we need to give girls an entry route in at 5 years old, or in primary school age. Why that's so important is because still now our girls teams don't really start playing in sort of league structures until like under 10, under 11's age group. There are some clubs that run them at younger than that, but generally you're kind of, if a girl's 7 or 8 and wants to be involved in football at the minute, her real only option is within mixed football, which can be great, but it's not always ideal for all of them. So what the Wildcats does is it just gives them a real basic introduction, and it's so much of the program is not about your standard turn up, have an hour's worth of football drills and play a small-sided game at the end. It's fun and friends is kind of a tagline for it. Turn up, have a giggle, make some jokes with your friends, spend some time colouring in some of the activity books that are provided that are football-based, doing some multi-skill stuff, but with an element of football in there somewhere. They're working so well. The one I've just been to has got they're at the max 30 girls that they can have at a session, and they can't take any more at the minute because they're already at the max. And there's others around the county that are the same. it's so good to see an opportunity for girls at that age to go and experience some football, but it not have to be run by a male, predominantly level 2 coach that wants to teach them proper football skills rather than just facilitate a session for girls that want to have a bit of fun and play some football. So that's going to be a huge part of what we do in the next few years in terms of increasing the number of girls that are involved in that entry level of football. Again, it's not for all. We get some 8 or 9-year-old girls that come along to Wildcats, and after 2 weeks they go, actually, I think I need a little bit more than that. I want to be in a team where I can play some fixtures. That's the sort of girl that then we would think about, well, there is actually a mixed team locally to you for that opportunity. So that program is really important in the entry route. We've then got quite a good structure in terms of clubs playing within league football. So again, geographically, because of what we've got to deal with in Devon, we have kind of 4 north, south, east, west, but we've got girls leagues that kind of cover each different area. So we've got what is called the Devon Girls League, which cover kind of east, mid and south. There's a North Devon Girls League, which, as the name says, clearly looks after the North region. And then the DGM have a really strong girls section or divisions to their league. They run it as kind of like every other age group. So to ensure we've got maximum participation, they'll run odds age groups for 1 year and then even the next year. It just ensures we have good numbers in divisions rather than leagues of 4 and 5. We've got leagues of 9 and 10. That's worked well. It might be something we need to look at in the future in terms of going back to single age bandings because the numbers are looking good. But that's kept a lot of girls involved in playing football at that age group. And then obviously we've toyed with and run a couple of times some under 18s divisions to bridge that gap between youth and open age or adult and ladies teams, because there is a large drop off of players. The same with male and female, just a little bit more prominent with females dropping off at that kind of 16 to 18 age group. So there's a little bit of work we need to do there to make sure that pathway works from 5-year-olds to keep them then into adult football. And then at kind of the top scale or the older scale, we'd started the ball rolling with getting, like we refer to them as just play sessions for ladies maybe that played years ago or don't want the competitive element of training fixtures every week and just want to have a kick about, a bit like Wildcats, but for ladies at the other end of the age spectrum. So we've got a few of those that have set up around the county. Again, that's something we need to make sure we've got available everywhere, because the key thing that's coming out of this for me is that we need to make it accessible for every woman or girl in football. There needs to be something in their area that they can get involved with if they want to. But we certainly got the makings of a really strong pathway there. We just need to work a little bit on the younger age, and the older age, the middle age is doing pretty well.
Brilliant. Thank you, mate. So that's interesting. So the Wildcats, so when they come in, and I think this is something that through the ages that, and I want to touch about the banding. So I'm glad you mentioned the age banding, because like you said, at some point, there's got to be a brave decision, I presume, from somebody to go, okay, we got enough players now to go to single age banding. And I think for me as well, looking at the younger players, you're quite right in saying a lot of them might not want to go to clubs. They might want that first, they're learning social skills, they're coming in, it's a friendly group, they're seeing different kids they don't see at school and nursery, etc., etc. So for me, it's ticking lots of boxes. Who predominantly is the most important part of that? Are they always trying to be linked with clubs, or do you run them yourselves? Do you source them out to certain companies?
So when the program was released, the FA were very clear to say that actually this needs to be an accessible opportunity for all sorts of organisations. So naturally, the majority of them are run by established football clubs. So like, as an example, we have our pro clubs, so Exeter, Plymouth, Torquay, all run Wildcat centres. St South West, we've got some Wildcat centres. But then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got some that are run by individuals that are kind of part of a club, but they've actually off their own back gone and set up their own Wildcat centre. And what's really pleasing for me is we've had some what we would refer to as being boy youth clubs that haven't got girls or haven't had girls teams previously, have really got on board with Wildcats and gone, actually, can we have a Wildcat centre? We've got some girls locally that want to play. And they've kind of used it as we don't do any girls provision. Maybe this can be the start of it. Like the one I've been to tonight is a perfect example of that, where it's a fairly newly formed youth club, but they don't have specific girls football until they got Wildcats. So it can be for anyone. Across the country, we've got like some universities run them. I think some schools run them. It's just kind of a program that just has to be accessible to the community. So it can't be something that's run like in school time. It's got to be out of curriculum time. And obviously, because you're dealing with young girls, it needs to be something that's suitable in terms of time frame. So running a session from 7 till 8 o'clock in December is not suitable for a 5 or 6 year old girl that's not played football before. They want to do it at 4:30 till 5:30 in the summer months or the spring months when the weather's likely to be better, because I don't think it really matters what your interest in football is. No one wants to be stuck outside late in December in cold, freezing wet weather, do you? So you can imagine what that's like for a young girl for their first experience to turn up to that. So the whole program, like I said, is based on the kind of months of the year, although some run all year long. Majority of them run sort of April through to September time over the summer months. And it's just that key being relax. There's no commitment. If you want to come once a month, come once a month. If you want to, come in and out and bring some friends with you one week because you feel like you want your mates there, it's all good. It's not about standard football where this is our squad, no, sorry, we can't have any more players coming in, or, well, if you don't come next week, you're not going to be playing in the match the following weekend. There's none of that. It's just completely relaxed. And we're still quite infant in terms of the programme, because it's only really been because of the impact of COVID. I don't want to bang on about that because obviously everybody does it at the minute, but that kind of put the Wildcats programme back a huge step, because we just got to the stage where we had nearly 40 centres licensed in the county, which is incredible, really. And after COVID, we're now looking, we've got a good number that are still going, but obviously some have lost a bit of interest or the desire, or staff have moved on, or they weren't able to commit to training or whatever it might be. So we're just trying to get the ball rolling again. But like I keep saying, for me, that is in the top 2 or 3 priorities in terms of what we're doing for the next 3 or 4 years, to make sure that we're getting that influx of girls involved for the first time.
Brilliant. For yourself then, how hard is that to manage with all the different people doing it, schools, like you say, clubs? How do you manage that for the next step? So obviously you're not able to see what every club's doing, and I know it's a difficult job. If you got the 40 like you mentioned, that's a lot of girls that are playing, that then the earmark into, if they want to go into a club, is a big ask. How do you manage that then as a county to know that they're not going to be, I'll make an example up here, they're not going to be all funneled into a club where actually, and never play because it's actually just looks great on a tick box, for example. I'm making this up, right? But and to make sure that it's done right, and actually they might have to do some joined up thinking to get more girls teams at different clubs, knowing that they might feed 3 or 4. How do you manage that?
Yeah, that's great. So they have to go through an application phase is the first point to reference, really. So when we get an allocation from the FA, our allocation was 39 for that particular year. We already had sort of 15, so there was kind of new applications, but we kind of earmark geographically where we'd like there to be some centres. So if we were to look at a map of Devon, I could have pulled a picture off for you, and you were to pinpoint them on the map, we've got really good coverage around the county, because we focused on making sure that within reason every girl has got access to a Wildcat centre that is reasonably close. And then when I say reasonably close, I think the furthest you might have to travel 20-25 minutes at the furthest distance in the county, which is really quite good considering the sort of geographical spread of what we've got. So they have to submit an application that has to be approved by us. So really, we don't really get any applications from clubs that we haven't already had a chat with, because we don't, although the application window was kind of open the first time round, we'd almost earmarked these clubs and already had a conversation with them about, actually, we'd like to have one in your area. You're a club that we've got a good relationship with. Were you shown an interest in girls football before? Could that be for you? Of course, you get the completely out of nowhere clubs. Like I've mentioned a couple, not names, but I mentioned clubs that are like boys predominantly, and they've come in and said, we'd like to have a Wildcat centre. They might be a risk. So back to your question about how to ensure they're doing it the right way, it's a calculated risk, because we think actually, if all it does is get a few more girls in that area playing football for a year or two, what harm can that really do? But but equally they're all given training from the FA. They've all got license agreements in terms of what they're supposed to deliver and how they're supposed to deliver it. There was some coach mentor support for them before COVID, and they're looking at how that's going to look in the future. So it's not kind of just, yeah, crack on, you run some sessions. They are monitored. You're right, it's impossible for me to know what's going on at 30, 40 centres. And I feel sorry sometimes because I just feel like I'm a keyboard warrior and emailing them stuff all the time going, you know, is this happening? Why have you not done this yet? And actually, I want to be able to get out and see them as much as I possibly can, because, you know, face-to-face stuff is much better, especially when you're talking about girls for the first time. If they're able to, or parents probably more so, if they're able to see the interest from Devon FA or from the clubs actually turning up to be interested in what's going on, that's got a lot more effect for them. But I have to say, we haven't had any big issues with clubs in terms of not running it properly. We've had a few that have never really got it going off the ground, and they've had to sort of pull the license and stuff, which you'd expect with that many. But I've only got positive things to say about it, and everybody that you speak to that's involved in it is just loving the fact that the program is what it is, and there's not a huge commitment for the coaches either, in terms of, yes, they've got to be DBS checked and do some safeguarding stuff, but we're not expecting them to be level 2 UEFA B licensed coaches. You've got to have a level 1 there, and then you can just have DBS adults there to assist the session. It's not about developing them as footballers, really. It's about engaging them in football at the early age. So yeah, it's just great, mate. I love it. It's such a great program, and the branding is amazing. If you've not seen the new Weetabix stuff, the old stuff was pretty good, but just like the imagery they use is so appealing. And they have like Disney themed weeks and stuff, which my daughter's 8, she's not really, I've tried to sort of go, do you want to have a go? And she's going to give it a go in a couple of weeks, I think. But she loves Disney. If I was to tell her, actually, this week you can dress up as Moana and go and play football for an hour, she'd be there without a doubt. And she might not even care about the football. It's just getting them through the door to start with, which is what the program's doing really well.
Yeah, I think you got to be careful. Years have gone by, so you would try and put a coach in there and think you can coach for 5 and 6 year olds, and then you're limiting the fun and the enjoyment and the engagement, and then it's no coincidence that they probably don't come back. So yeah, there's a time and a place for those coaches, and it sounds like it's fantastic. And like you just said, just about getting them through the door, getting them understanding, being part of football in some way. So when they go into clubs, then is it something that is there? Oh, I don't want to say targets, but is there like numbers that you want to try and get into to continuing playing? Because obviously it'd be great to have all these girls coming in, and I'll presume it would be then a little bit disappointing if they then just didn't do much after Wildcats and just fell out then. So how hard is that to create these clubs, or age group, should I say?
Yeah, I don't know yet, because the Wildcats is still quite new. We haven't really had that transition effect from Wildcats into teams. There are some. Central in Exeter is a really good example. They were one of the first ones to have that sort of Wildcat centre, and they've now got an under 12 girls team, Central under 12 girls, Wildcats. They've called themselves Wildcats, which is great. It'd be nice, wouldn't it, in 5 years to have loads of girls' youth teams called, you know, blah 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 Wildcats, because you can see where they come from. Target wise, we've kind of always worked from county FA perspective on like the KPIs that the FA give us, and that's usually been on like team numbers. We've gone away from team numbers now, really, and we're looking more at like participation of player numbers rather than team numbers, because like, what does team number really mean? Like, you could have loads of teams with hardly any players and you still get the same recognition as another county that has the same number of teams with loads and loads of players. It doesn't really work. So we've got targets now that are based on player numbers, and Wildcats is included in that from next year, in terms of making sure that the girls that attend the Wildcat sessions are properly registered, which is another issue that we need to sort out technology-wise with their centres. But that will give us an understanding then of how many girls and ladies are involved in football as a whole. In terms of monitoring how that transition from Wildcats into then club football works, I think that's where we're lucky that most of our centres do have that link with the club already, and you can kind of already see the drip feed of players. You know, it's for 5 to 11 year olds, so sometimes you get majority 8 and 9, and then 1 or 2 10 and 11 year olds. and some of the centres have said, oh, they're allowed to come still when they're after 11. You go, no, the programme isn't for 12-year-olds, it is for 5 to 11-year-olds. Once they've reached that, top end, then need to be transitioning into a team, or they may not continue anymore, whatever the problem might be. So I think we probably need it's probably 2 years really, I'd say, to see how the Wildcats effect how that effect has worked for sort of the girls football. My vision or my hope would be that actually in 2 years' time we look back at it and go, well, do you know what? We've now got girls leagues or girls divisions starting at under 8, under 9, rather than under 10, under 11. And that can only be an effect of the Wildcats starting the girls at 5, 6, and 7. There then being enough players for teams to create a girls team, and we start at the younger age. What we want to do ultimately is have girls starting in divisions at under 7s like boys teams do, so that there's equal opportunities all the way through. And I don't think we're far off. And like I keep saying, the Wildcats is going to have such a big part to play on that. But not just those girls staying involved as players, some mums that get involved and help coach. And the fact that they might then have a vested interest in maybe helping run the team or doing some coaching or whatever it might be. The Wildcats isn't just about those young players playing. There's actually a lot that goes around it with female coaching and things as well. So it's just brilliant, and it's going to have a really massive long-term effect as long as Weetabix keep funding it, hopefully.
To be fair, I think it sounds great. It sounds like it's, like you said, it's a few years away. I think you see a big difference.
Yeah.
Moving to the older girls, and this was something that I personally have spoke about in the last sort of few podcasts with clubs, because I didn't realise about this, which I'm going to mention now. So when we come to girls formats, we touched on the bandings, and I get that. That's probably to do, like you said earlier, numbers, making sure that you're going to get a league running. So dual banding, I get. What about the format? So, and I'll give you and I've said this previously, but my example was, I now do a post 16 at Torquay Academy with the girls as well as the boys. So this year was our first sort of full intake, and we went straight into 11v11. We went straight into obviously coaching daily, and the difference in girls was so vast that I sort of tried to find out what they had done before, and you'd have girls that never kicked a ball before they joined TA in sixth form. You've had girls that have played in men's teams, but the big thing for me is that they had never played more than 9-a-side. So they have gone from under 16 playing 9-a-side into 11v11 in college, and then probably within 6 months some of them going into women's football, which is daunting for them anyway, playing a format that they've not played apart from the first 6 months in college. So what's the plans on that, and do you see that changing? Because for me that's a huge step.
Yes. It's something that is slowly changing, and it might not seem drastic, but like back from when I first started, a lot of the leagues were just 7-a-side at all girls age groups. It used to be 11-a-side at sort of the under 16 and age group when I first started the role, but team numbers were so low and the drop off was alarming that actually I don't think the season was finishing with the same, teams were dropping out because they couldn't fill the fixtures, or you regularly have teams turn out with 9 or 10 and getting battered, and it's not fun for anybody. So kind of a decision was made back then to reduce the format. The vision is, and it has to be, that certainly at least a year prior to them making that jump into like ladies football, there needs to be 11-a-side exposure, because how are they meant to prepare? And it's a big jump, actually. I know it sounds like it's only 2 extra players, but the pitch is a lot bigger. The tactics that are employed in 11v11 can be very different. You can do a lot with 9v9 and it can be great, but it's, like you said, it's not the same. The bigger concern for me probably is actually still the age that they're not playing 9v9 at. So a lot of the leagues don't start 9v9 until kind of under 13. And that's the age where boys start playing under 11v11. So for me, it needs to be the vision that the structure would be a change down the age groups first. So we'd look at actually, let's start playing 9v9 at 11s rather than 13s. And then can we get our under 15, under 16 age groups playing some 11v11 football? Some leagues have toyed with being a bit flexible. So at those older age groups going, okay, look, we'll play a 9v9 league because no everyone can commit to it. But if on a match day or prior to match day, when you're confirming with your opposition, you've got a 9v9 pitch which is brought in on an 11v11 pitch, and both teams have got 14 players. Crack on and play 11v11. There's no reason for that not to be allowed. And as you know, like in a lot of the youth football, in terms of clubs maybe thinking, oh yeah, but there's an advantage to play this, that, or the other. Goal difference doesn't come into it. They'll go on head-to-head records. So it doesn't really matter whether you play a 9v9 against one team and 11v11 against another. Ultimately, all you're doing is giving them a better exposure to that format. Obviously, the girls that are playing within mixed football, or that maybe are like this at a centre with us or with one of the other clubs, they're exposed to 11v11 at the younger ages. So, sort of from under 14s, they'll be playing 11v11. But yeah, for the sort of the predominantly what we'd class as the girls teams and the girls leagues, they're still that step behind where probably we need to be. It's just a conversation we need to have with those leagues and try and get them to buy into the same vision, if you like. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want the leagues to be doing different things. It makes sense to kind of, this is what we see as a vision for County FA, and this is what we'd like them to do. We've looked at it with our county cups as well and gone, do you know what, at some stage, our under 14s or under 16s county cups, maybe we just go, they are 11v11. And if you play in 9v9 at league football, that's great. But actually, if you're going to play our county cups, they are 11v11. And back to sort of the influx of girls. I mean, a lot of teams now have got good, healthy size squads. There obviously are some that still need to recruit some, but generally you're looking at squads that potentially have easily got enough to up the format a little bit. But for the development of the game and to sort of look for the future in terms of those girls that might then feed into some of the clubs we spoke about earlier, that sort of higher level like Argyle, Exeter, Buckingham, those sorts of teams. If they haven't had that exposure to 11-11 and they haven't played mixed football, they're going to really struggle with that transition. So, yeah, great question. It's definitely something that it needs to be looked at. I think now is probably not the best time in after the lockdown and things, because we understand that some might have stepped away or dropped out. So we need to be a bit tentative with turning around for next season and going, right, you're doing 11-11. But perhaps over the course of next season, that's where we start talking to the clubs and the leagues and go, can you start pushing this for us? We really need to get it to be on a par with boys football. I keep doing that for boys football because it's mixed football. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Yeah.
I know what you mean. Brilliant. I've touched on the younger ones and I've touched on the older ones there of what's hopefully going to change for them. Talk to me about the ones that are stepping into mixed football and that are excelling, the ones that, and I want to hear about the girls that have, been through the pathway and been really successful. What's out there for the girls that are absolutely flying and, it's horrible to say, but are too good for their girls teams in their ages, and they have to go and fly the nest and find it elsewhere, predominantly probably playing in boys teams. But how did they then get back into playing high level girls teams?
Yeah, good question. Again, it's a really good point about that kind of stepping into play mixed football and then getting back into girls football or ladies football down the line. So there's a mixture of girls that play in mixed football. It's not always the girls that are excelling. There's a lot of girls that play mixed football because it's the best option for them. Their friends are boys and they're in that team, or they're in an area still. There are some areas where there isn't a suitable age group for them to play girls football. In some areas, it is as simple as, well, the girls league play on a Sunday, but actually the boys league play on a Saturday, and we can't do Sundays because they might do another sport or have other commitments. So there are girls that play mixed football not on an ability wise. And then on the flip side, obviously, you've got some girls that have always been involved in mixed football, and that has really helped them develop into great players. Or you've got other girls that have played, like you said, have played in girls' leagues or girls' teams and got to an age where they think, I need to be a bit more challenged here. And they've decided to think about, let's try and make that jump into mixed football. Some girls have done that as late as like under 13s, under 14s, and they've played girls football through to that age and then realised, actually, I'm quite good. I really want to push myself here, with an ambition of making big time in a few years down the line. It's something that is it can suit a lot of different sort of variety of girls and ability of girls. From a sort of centre perspective, which I know you've got down on your sort of agenda for us to have a chat about as well, but it's for us now, we're at a position where I don't know percentage wise, but a really high percentage of the girls that are with us at our advanced coaching centre are playing mixed football. And we're almost at a stage where if they're not, we're encouraging them to consider it, and not necessarily to replace the girls football. So quite a lot do a little bit of both, which is great because we don't want them to leave playing with their friends and where they've played all that time. But actually, if they're a girl that have got real potential, it's so important that they're really, really pushed weekly with their club fixtures. There's only so much we can do seeing them once a week for training and playing fixtures 10 to 12 times a season. We need them week in, week out, getting really pushed to the highest level. And you've got girls that are playing up a year in a boys team because they're good enough to do it. And I think that perception is really changing now, Chris, because years ago you'd have clubs going, oh, it's a bit, we don't really want a 14-year-old girl playing with our boys because they're physically too good, or they're just not, they can't cope with it. Whereas now you get in boys teams fighting for some of the girls to go into their teams because they know how good they are, and that's like kind of testament to how clubs have taken that mixed football on board and kind of gone, actually, why would we treat a girl any different to a boy if ability wise they're on a par or able to cope with it. We've even had 2 or 3 girls, more than that now, about 4 girls teams play in boys leagues and do well. Team in Plymouth won a boys division under 12s a couple of years ago. So, that's such a big statement to make, isn't it? That girls can compete with boys, and they need to be given that push if they've got that ambition down the line to really sort of make it. And some of them have got that ambition to make a career out of football. So the best way for them is to look at the best option, which generally would come in mixed football.
So I was really pleasantly shocked when because I spoke to Natasha down at Matt Hodgson and doing the girls performance centre down there. So I'm trying to work with them, and it's opened my eyes to the sort of bespoke programs that they put for the real sort of pathway for the international team at a young age. And I spoke to Sarah as well, who's local down here, that is involved with the England setup, and they explained to me that there's a couple of girls in Iverbridge. I think I'm okay to say that. So they're excelling, and they then go to a boys club. I think they then go to an ADC, but then they might go and get some 1-to-1, and they go and get some strength conditioning, and it's amazing to hear it. It's I think it's fantastic. And then on the other hand, I think, if there was loads of them, you wouldn't have the time and the resources to do that. So it's great now. What happens when you have loads of them, and does it then take away from the unbelievable time that they're getting and the real bespoke programs that they get? And I was really impressed, and I had no idea. I had no idea that happened, and I was gobsmacked in a good way. But like you said, I think that they have to have that based on, because we're not quite there yet in the growth of the female game, so they have to do these extras.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it basically, we don't have a Chelsea, Man City like you spoke about, so we haven't got that female structure in terms of the real top end elite clubs running girls football. Having the Women's High Performance Centre at Marjon is amazing. There's only 10 of them in the country, so geographically we were likely to have one down this way because Southwest is such a big area. But for us to get one in Devon is amazing. And like you said, that what they offer for the girls that are really high performers is exceptional. The offer they get, it's not just they do a bit of extra training. They've got such individual programs for them, where Sarah that you mentioned, Sarah will go into their schools and support and have conversation with their schools about what's their school program looking like. Can we be careful about lessons on a Monday morning after they've been on a camp all weekend? Can they do some extra sessions somewhere else to catch up on things? It's not just always about the football, it's about kind of that education setting as well. And one of the biggest successes we've had in recent time, in my time there, is we now have 2 girls that are training at the academy with Plymouth Argyle. That is the highest level that anybody of that age could play at. and they are training with them. I'm really pleased Argyle have got on board with that, because previously it was kind of and you know, understandably so, they're thinking, actually, we're looking at boys that could go on to play for Plymouth Argyle men's team. Why does it benefit us to use our resources to have girls there that, with respect, could never play in the Argyle men's team, because obviously they can't. They've now got on board with the fact that we have got an Argyle ladies team that are doing pretty well, and more, even better than that aside, they've just gone, we've got some girls that are outstanding in their ability. They need a real push, and we can provide that for them. Bring them in, and they.
I think it's great. I think it's like unbelievable that, you know, somebody's got to do it, and if they're the first to make that change, I think it's amazing, because someone told me about that the other day, and I started to question, like you just said, like, well, can they play? Can they play? Which I don't know if they can play in the academy. I don't know what the rules are in academies.
Yeah. So they're not doing fixtures. That's kind of not the aim at the minute. The aim more is just, let's get them in their training program. Down the line, who knows? Again, why can't they play in the fixtures?
Exactly.
If you're looking at the bigger picture here, we're all in the same country. We're all looking at producing football players, male or female. If the best way to make England women better in the future is by having girls playing in boys' academies at pro clubs at that level, then I think there's something that would come in. And a lot of the focus talent-wise is a little bit more, is more and more geared towards player focus. So yes, we have our girls squads that we select, and they're all really talented players. But where there are the really elite ones, and we've been lucky to have, you know, 5 or 6 over the last few years that have, you know, been part of England camps and gone to tournaments abroad and things with England squads. When we're talking about those, like, absolutely the minority, but the real elite talent, you've got to do everything possible to give them the opportunity to progress, like a boy would be able to do in football, because there's just so many opportunities for him. So it's a great structure, and like I said, the High Performance Centre is going to be a really big part of giving them those extra bits that we're unable to do, and I'm unable to do from a character perspective, because we just don't have the time and the resources to be able to really focus into them, other than when we deliver the ACC program, which, you know, is working really, really well. But it's just so important that they're pushed. I think that we're pushed in the right way. They've got to be pushed to their limits to be able to sort of, you know, get the best out of what they can achieve. I
love it. I think it's great. ADC then. So we touched on it a little bit there. So just can you give me an overview of how did it work? So where do you recruit from? What's the purpose for it? What's the exit route? Is there one? What's the start to finish look like?
Okay, cool. So years ago, people would know it as a centre of excellence. So years ago, it was the girls centre of excellence. Initially, you know, it was run by Plymouth Argyle all those years ago. That was not always taken well, because in those times, that was their club. They were selected for they had to leave their grassroots clubs. That quickly became apparent in our region, which is why we've kind of got this bespoke advanced coaching centres program, that because of how we are in the southwest, and it's the same in sort of the northeast as well, in some of those areas, there would be girls that wouldn't bother to trial, or they wouldn't want to trial, because they wouldn't want to stop playing in their club. Even some girls, I won't name her, but a player who for years didn't want to come to trial with us because she wanted to carry on playing in her boys, a mixed team, and understandably so, because her concern was, well, if I sign for you, I've got to stop playing for them, which is really helping me develop. When the program changed, we're going back probably 5-6 years now to the Advanced Coaching Centre program, I was massively involved, and so was Somerset FA, in helping shape what it looked like for the Southwest. And we were quite clear from the start that you need to allow players to remain with their clubs, because that's how we're going to tap into the girls that are playing mixed football, that might be some of the more elite players. And it needs to be supportive, an additional offer to what they're doing. So not to impact on, let's go away from having Saturday fixtures, let's do them other times so that they can, you know, get the best out of their club football. So that program's worked really well for the last few years. It's kind of recruitment wise, I'd love to be able to have like an ongoing recruitment process with a scouting network that go around and see all the girls playing, but we're just not in a position to be able to do that, unfortunately. So the process works that we run yearly trials. We didn't last year properly because of COVID, but we run a big trial process where they're open trials, and anybody can register for them. That obviously they're eligible for the age groups. We don't go down the route of them having to be nominated by their coach or be, kind of invited to come. We just want all girls to have that opportunity to go, I want to give those trials a go. And it is great to see every year at trials, you get a real mix turn up. And as we go down the years, more so we are getting, the level of the trials is going up and up and up. And it's made it so hard to choose squads in the last couple of years. But it's still great to see that you get some girls that have maybe just started playing at under 11s or 12s that think, I want to go to the trials to see how I fit in comparison to the other girls. Or you'll get girls that live in, some rural places that don't see the girls from Plymouth or Exeter play very often, and actually they want to come to the trials to go, I'm quite good in my local team, but how am I in comparison to those? So you get some real surprise ones that will turn up and you think, oh, they haven't played much football, they've only played for a year, and then you see them at trials and you think, wow, there's something there. So it's great to see it in that sense. But obviously that we then do is we invite the ones that perform well at the first sort of phase of the trials back to then trial with the girls that are already part of the squad for the next phase of trials, which is where then we select our squads for the season. So it can be difficult because it's quite a closed shop. The trials are done and dusted in a couple of weeks, and if there's girls that can't attend or miss it, it can be difficult for them to get involved. Of course, if we know there's an exceptional talent somewhere that missed the trials, or we see them out and about, we'd always try and get a girl that should be at that level. We would try and encourage them to get them involved. But it's the way the squads have been selected the last couple of years. We've, particularly at the younger age groups, so for quite a few years we've had quite strong older age groups, but maybe struggled a little bit quality wise with the younger ones. We had about 90 girls trial the last time we ran full trials for the under 12s. You could have had 40 of them in the squads. There was honestly not many girls there that were of a good level. And you're kind of trying to choose a squad of 16 players, and you're looking at ones that you're not selecting. You're like, I haven't really got a reason as to why we're not selecting them. They're outstanding players. It's just monitoring them. So for us, it's great to see that the level's really going up. And the program's really supportive of them, because once they're selected, we train weekly. We've got a load of really good coaches, high qualifications, but also just real vast experience in working, not just in girls football, but in academy settings or understanding what an elite pathway looks like. More and more now we're playing fixtures against boys teams, mixed teams, which is really beneficial. We still play against the other county girls teams as well, but it's really good for us to have those additional fixtures where we'll play. We've got one in a couple of weeks where we'll play on a Friday night at Coach Road, and we'll have a couple of boys teams coming to play against our age groups. It's so good to see the shock on their faces sometimes in a good way. The boys, they'll turn up and they'll half time they'll be going, oh wow, they're quite good, aren't they? Some of them still don't expect it. So it's really nice and you get so many compliments from the parents and coaches afterwards to say, actually, those girls are fantastic, aren't they? And they are, equivalent or better than half the time in some of the teams that they've come up against. So the pathway's there. And then obviously the benefit of the ACC is that it's the place where the pathway feeds through then into, when you spoke to Sarah about sort of regional camps and onto England camps. Like I said previously, it's so exciting for us that we've had girls that have gone through and represented England at sort of youth levels and playing in the Super League now. And we've got several girls on our squads now that have got huge potential, real huge potential. So it's just trying to make sure they're not overdoing it, which can sometimes be the issue.
Definitely. And for those ones that are not, because it sounds like you're getting more and more of a year to go into those England pathways, which is amazing. What about the others that then get to, because is the oldest under 16? Is that the oldest?
Yeah.
So what happens with the sort of the middle group? Do you then try and tag with women's teams? Do you try and earmark certain clubs that that have, this come up the other day on one, that you have some teams that just have one women's team and that jump is too big for some, but then you have others that have a development team and a second team, which do you find that you try and work with those guys to try and get them in?
Yeah. You did ask that question previously. I did answer it, didn't I? So
Right, mate,
yeah. Yeah, it's not always easy. So part of the program is that, so we've got under 12s, under 14s, and under 16s. What we're really keen on is when they're, particularly girls that have been with us right from the beginning, we understand that it's a journey then when they leave us. We don't just go, thanks for your time with us, enjoy your life in football, see you later. It is important that we feed them into the appropriate place. We've got natural links with the likes of Plymouth and Exeter, just because they both run a kind of, and Torquay, they both run a sort of girls' centre programme. So there's kind of a natural feed sometimes into those. Location-wise, we have a large percentage of girls that do come from the kind of Plymouth West area. So there is quite a big crossover with Argyle in that sense. But what's really good is actually, if you look at the girls that have left us over the last few years, and you look at where they're playing now, they are spread out. They're not all formed. You know, it's not like the whole under 16 group go and make a development side for Plymouth or for Exeter or for one of those. There's sort of 4 or 5 that might go to that club, and 4 or 5 that go to that club, and 1 or 2 that go to that club. And what's also really important to remember is, even though they've been in the elite pathway with us for a certain number of years, they don't necessarily want to continue that at 16. If they haven't been involved in maybe regional camps or England camps, they might have gone, do you know what, I loved being part of this. I didn't quite make the level that maybe I thought I could one day. And now I just want to play local football. I want to go back to just enjoying playing football. So we have to respect sometimes that there are girls that come out of the centre programme and want to just step into ladies football at any level. And it's not about development any further for them, but it's just about staying involved in football. But the vast majority do go on and play, you know, sort of good level. And that's important for us to keep feeding them into those clubs, for us to be able to push in the future. Ideally, we don't want our players going from Devon's ACC to sign for Bristol City or for Chelsea or whoever it ends up being. We want them to sign for a Devon-based club that is competing with those teams. We are getting there. There's a really good link with them, but it can be tough just because we haven't got, like I said before, we haven't got that influx of sort of high-level teams to really push them into. But we'll get there. It's just, you know, they need that vision, don't they? They start with us. We want to be able to say to those girls at under 12s, this is what we're aiming for. This is what you can do in the future. But naturally, I think because of where we are, sometimes you've just got to accept that it's the same with boys. If you're going to make it at the very, very top level, well, you're going to have to move to London or to Birmingham or to wherever it might be to play for those really, really big clubs. I think we've just got to accept that's where we are.
Yeah, but a bonus is, and to end on that point, that you've got those success stories. So it's not like it's a pipe dream. You know, you've got them, and I think that's the biggest thing. And a lot of people in this area, we can sometimes give as much positivity and sort of understanding of a great pathway looks like this, but if you've got nothing that ever shows it's gone through it, then it's a waste of your breath. So, you know, it's hard to sell. So you've got that success, which is amazing.
Yeah, and just one last point, we've always had really good like feedback from the FA back in the days when it was kind of little old Devon got a player that they want to push up to like the England camps, and we'd get like the squads through, and you'd look at the list of 23 players selected, and it'd be Chelsea, Arsenal, Devon, and you think, we've got a player in the best 23 in the country selected in that squad. You're right. It's about letting everybody know about that. And it's not something we're very good at. We've had discussions today in the office about our strategy in it. We need to show off more in a good way and say, look, we have got these players that have gone on to do this. We've got players currently with us. We just had a girl selected in the Plymouth Schools FA squad, first ever girl selected in that squad. Fully deserves to be in it. It's not, oh, we'll choose the girl this year. She'd be one of the better players in the whole squad. We need to show off about that more. So the girls, like you said, if their ambition is to go on to play at a high level and be an England player one day, they need to see that it's possible for them in this region, don't they? So,
difficult, isn't it? That fine line between being humble and sort of just doing a good job and hoping that that's enough, that people see it. But unfortunately, they don't. And sometimes you got to shout out about it. But if it's not in your nature, it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
last couple, mate. I appreciate that we're getting to the hour mark, and amazing so far, mate. I appreciate your time. Like I said, couple of last little bits. Hopefully we've covered loads here. I'm happy. I'm over the moon. So the couple of things that I want to talk about, based on bits that I had in a previous podcast, that I'm hoping that there might be a vision to make these work. So a couple of things that were mentioned before is this. I think is amazing that there's more girls playing, more girls teams. That's the aim. How do you see that fitting in where we live in Devon, as in venues? So one of the things we spoke about was, and we mentioned it on this podcast, that somebody that does a Wildcats is predominantly just an all male club. And there's been some horror stories about, you know, they get a girls team in and they've got a quarter of an AstroTurf because, or, you know, they're in the corner. We've done our little bit. We've ticked the box. We've got a female team, helps charter standard, etc., whatever it may be. Different stories, different clubs. But how do you see that working? Because for me, my head when I was trying to explain it is that these clubs that are predominantly boy heavy, if they do want to add to that, you know, on top of the girls that are just purely girls teams, how does that work with venues without trying to take away some of the boys teams? Because we just don't seem to have enough unless we invest in obviously more AstroTurfs, etc. How do you see that working, mate?
It's a tough question. I don't know the answer. What we have found a lot of the time with clubs that do get on board with girls stuff is that they make a real concerted effort to be like, positive discrimination is probably a good one, in terms of like, actually girls get often underrepresented and don't get the same treatment, so let's make sure they get the good slot on that one. But then that's got the knock-on effect, like you've just said, about, well, does that then mean that one of the boys teams doesn't get what they had before? Facilities is always a huge problem. We're proud of like what we've got in terms of like, we've got some really good 3G sites around. There's not a coverage obviously in every area of the county. In some areas, Exeter being one is more difficult, predominantly because of the schools running a lot of other sports that don't want a 3G, they want a hard sand base. So it's not easy. I think it's just about educating the clubs a little bit about not overdoing it in terms of numbers that they have. So we've got some mega sized clubs that cope with it brilliantly, and they structure the sessions so that it's all equal, and they make best use of the facilities they've got access to. I don't know how, until, like you said, until we get more facilities than we need, how you get around that issue of giving them that best experience and allowing them the best opportunity to progress, because they've got the right space to train and they've got the right facilities, the top facilities to train on, to progress. What possibly is an option is we need to do a little bit of work with where we've got some girls standalone clubs possibly, or you get like, you know, a boys club that has just one girls team, but actually just down the road there's another club that have got good facility space. Do we need to be a little bit more open about, just because you're with that club, does that mean that you need to train at that facility? And obviously if you've got a 3G site, people don't mind traveling 20-30 minutes to train on it because it's just so beneficial. But actually, would you travel 30 minutes to train on, like you said, a quarter of a quarter, or you're just not going to give them the experience they want to stay involved, are you? I don't know the answer to that one, how you get around it. It's
a tough question. I didn't have an answer, and I was like, you know what, you know, and you mentioned it there. I think that the headache will be, or the barrier will be, that we have such a how can I word it? It's so primal that a club is a club, and they don't want to work a lot of times with other clubs. And then I think we mentioned tonight that you need to have some flexibility in leagues. You know, so a prime example is you just mentioned there. It shouldn't be out the realms that you can somehow share a venue with a club if you play on a different day. But then on the flip side, I know that some clubs or women's teams within a club have been kicked 20 minutes down the road, and they look at it like an insult that why can't we play on that club pitch? But it might be that they're playing a Sunday, and predominantly they've had the under 16 boys play their last 3 years, and they're going to stay there. So you have all these headaches, which I know that I'm not asking anyone for magic wand because it's solid, and I'd hate to be trying to make those decisions. But my head is that I see the girls game growing massively and quick. And for me, I can't see it being looked at equal very quickly if they're not going to get the same opportunities as the boys. And I'd hate to see all the hard work that everybody's doing if they're never going to be able to get on, and then they fall off, like, well, we're not going to get the same as what the boys again, for example. And the more I see of it, the more it sort of dawns on me that we struggle for venues big time, and unless clubs work together, I can't see how you're going to improve that ongoing as hard enough as it is now. Difficult one.
No, I agree. I mean, the model around in other countries, for example, or even in some areas of England, we've got some mega clubs. They have super clubs. You've got 40, 50 teams that are in effect equivalent of 3 or 4 different clubs running their own sort of 10 teams. They've actually just gone, this doesn't make sense. Why don't we link these together? And then that enables you to go down facility-wise. You've got one club controlling how it works rather than 2 clubs fighting over the same astroturf and getting slots. You actually work together and make it fair. You also have that option then of, if you've got 3 girls teams at one age group, that actually gives you the option then to go, well, we've got some players that aren't interested in playing too competitively. They just like turning up and playing. It gives you that option then to kind of put them in the right area. So again, geographically, because of the size of Devon, Plymouth's probably the exception because it's a small city with a big population in comparison to some other places. Everywhere else is so spread out. I just think, again, I think we've just got to accept that's how we are down here. But like we discussed there, just need partnership work is the key word, I think, isn't it? Just less and people working together to make sure that you're a boys' club or a men's club with a first team that play at a really good level. Actually, we've got some facilities that might really benefit that girls' team down the road. Why don't we offer it to them? Why don't we let them use it on a Sunday morning, because that will be better for them? That's the kind of route I think we might have to get to at some stage.
Yeah, and a personal sort of story of mine, I remember years ago, and I won't say the names, but I tried to merge a boys and a girls club together for the benefit of then you're working as one. You've got 2 sites that then become one and you share it appropriately. But you always then are going to either have to have 2 clubs agree that they're going to merge some sort of name, and it's all, especially if you're part, and I won't go into who it was, but they were part of setting that original club up. It was like giving their baby away. So they didn't want to do it. And I honestly think at the time it was probably would have been amazing, but it is what it is. But I can only see that being beneficial, but you've got to be a brave person to either lose your identity and for the bigger picture or merge your identity. So I'm hoping that will change, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it's so important to listen to these players. And kind of off track a little bit, but a big part in what we're doing in terms of like our safeguarding and stuff in the county is listen to the voice of youth. So like in that scenario you've just described there, it's like, well, the club committee might not want to lose the name and the club colours and whatever it might be, but actually if you asked all the players and put on the table what the offer is, what are they going to say? You get a few that go, no, we don't want to stop playing in that colour or whatever, but actually most of them are going to go, well, yeah, that makes sense. We don't care whether we're called, that name or this name. Hopefully we're at a point now where actually clubs are a bit more open to thinking about what do the kids want, what do the players want, rather than what my pride says. It's kind of what you're saying there, isn't it?
And I think we might have to be a bit sneaky, and COVID's absolutely battered us for many reasons to get playing football. Maybe we've got to be a little bit clever with using COVID as they didn't play at all. So let's make sure that doesn't happen again by working together. So that might be a little, I wouldn't say silver lining because that's terrible to say, but you know what I mean by that. So last bit, mate, because I appreciate fantastic again. I ask it on everyone, mate. It's part of obviously what the name is. What do you think the female game, players and the game looks like in 10 years, mate? What's your thoughts?
In Devon, unfortunately.
I'm going to go Devon, yeah, Devon.
Wow, what a question that is. So can I say 8 years? That'd be double since I started. So if I kind of look at it and go, I've been involved, let's say 10 years. I've been involved for 10 years now, and I've seen the progress that's been made to here. If I'm fast forwarding now from 10 years, genuinely, I want to see a Super League club in the county, minimum one. That's 10 years away. Like that is really sounds ambitious, but actually it should be achievable. I want to see girls divisions play in the same formats as boys, all the way from under 7s through to under 18s and then into ladies. I want them to be playing the same formats, the same age groups. I don't think I can expect and say I want the same numbers of girls playing as boys. That's obviously an ultimate target, is to go, that should be the case. But I think we do have to understand that the makeup of young girls and young boys is different. And there are other interests for girls away from sport or in other sports that maybe there's not quite as many for boys. So I think we just have to accept that predominantly we're probably looking at what's always going to be a slightly heavier weighted boys sport, but certainly get those numbers much closer. And if you were to put them into percentages now and say we've got, you know, I don't know, 15% of youth players are female and 85 are male, let's get that to 70 and 30 or whatever, just get that number closer together. I don't know how the pathway in terms of the elite pathway is going to look by then. If we're lucky enough to get a Super League club by that point, then how I see the ACC now would be very different. But I still think it's still so important to have that those role models. So let's say in 10 years we're able to go, look, girls, we've got 2 England internationals, we've got 5 that are playing in the Super League, if we haven't got our own club by then, and have more to show for sort of the position we're at. And then the big one, so that's kind of clubs and pathway. The big one for me would be that kind of school offer. And although obviously my role is not really schoolwork, as a whole, the FA priorities in the next few years are let's get equal opportunities for girls in primary schools. I'd love to be able to have some sort of process or evidence that shows that actually primary school and secondary school football is the same for both boys and for girls, and that they're able to feed into like those sort of post-16 programs that boys can feed into so easily, much more easily for those girls that want a bit of football alongside their education. At the minute, there's not many opportunities. It's easy to say, isn't it? Like, oh, let's just have everyone playing. But I think those are the kind of the key headlines. But also for me, it's that accessibility that we spoke about earlier. Those are like the kind of the mainstream aspects. But actually, let's be able to say in Devon that if you're 5 or you're 85 and you want some form of football involvement, there's an option for you. Whether that's Wildcats, whether it's walking football, whether it's coaching, refereeing, we want everybody to be able to have their input into it. And on the coaching sense, we need to have more female coaches able and comfortable to move up the coaching pathway. And I think that's only going to happen. The more girls we get playing and starting younger, you're naturally going to attract those mums. Because let's be honest, a lot of the males that end up coaching are dads at 6 and 7, aren't they? They get involved to help coach their son. They do a level 1, they do a level 2, I quite enjoy this, and they get into it. If the girls are starting at 6 and 7, yeah, well, there's still going to be dads that are leading up, but that's how we're going to get the more sort of female volunteer workforce supporting the female game. But yeah, such an open-ended question. It could be anything, but it's just got to be upward trend, hasn't it? The FA's done so much work to promote it and push it. We can't rest on our laurels and kind of just go, yeah, we're doing it right now, let's just keep going. It's just got to keep pushing.
Can't take your foot off now, mate. You can't take your foot off now.
Definitely not.
What about a player? How do you see a player looking differently 10 years time?
Oh, how do I see a player looking differently in 10 years time? I think because the opportunity to be more equal in terms of male football, I think what you're looking at is a female player being technically female football has been good for years, but the physical element is becoming more and more important. So I think if you fast forward 10 years time, I think you'll see a bigger emphasis in female football in terms of the physical and nutritional stuff that goes along with like the male game. Because if you compare like the sort of the Super League teams and the England teams now, and look at the players they had sort of those years ago in comparison. I mean, Chelsea's my team, so I've really started following the Chelsea women's team in the last couple of years because it's been in the forefront of everybody's mind. And there was a really good post that came up the other day, and it was a post of